Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guest. I got to tell you something, people. Back when I was like 10 or 11 years old, my brother always played great albums. And one of the albums he played was Cheech and Chong's wedding album. And I still remember, I would look at that album, and I'm 10 or 11, so I really didn't get the concept of the conjoined twins on the cover and the bride being pregnant, but I just laughed because she had a bag on her head. And then I would listen to the album, and at 10, you don't really understand things. But when I heard, well, here's your pepperoni and here's your pizza, and it looks like your grandfather eating ice cream, it just made me die laughing, and even earache my eye when he's like, bend over, bend over, what are you going to do, you pervert? I don't even think I knew what a pervert was, but it was just the voices that made me laugh and just the sounds, and that's what comedy should be. I think too many people delve too much into comedy instead of just laughing. And as a kid, and I just listened to the album this weekend, and I still laugh my ass off. But I think that's what's great about my guest. My guest is Tommy Chong, who is Cheech and Chong, and he made me laugh. And actually, it's one of the reasons why I had a 10-year career in stand-up comedy, because those early years of listening to make me laugh. And how you doing, Tommy?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm having a good time. I'm enjoying my life. I'm, getting older and actually, I'm learning how to cope with old age. And if you do it right, it's like anything. It's like fine wine. You know what I mean? Like the wine, in order to get incredible, it has to age. And if it's aged properly and taken care of and then treated right, it can be a beautiful experience. And that's what I'm finding out about old age, is that it's just another moment in your life that if you do it right, you can really enjoy it.
Well, I think what it also is, because my mother-in-law is 78. And she is always on the go. And I think it's like, if you just sit there and go, you're getting older, you know that you can't go 200 miles per hour when you used to, but like 100, and you just keep busy. I think you just enjoy it because you're also bringing all this wisdom of everything you've learned through the years.
Well, yeah. Well, the human body itself is a thing of beauty. And it's something that, if you, like an old classic car, if you take care of it, it'll just increase it with beauty and actually service. And that's what I'm finding out, is that there is no reason. There's no reason to, it depends. Everybody's such an individual. And what I learned in my quest for satisfaction, that's what we were looking for. And I don't know, man. The older I get, the younger it seems that I start. My memory. I remember listening to comedians, very Mums Maberly. She was this black lady, and she was actually very gay, and she was the man of the gay world. She was actually the guy, and she dressed like a man, but when she did her act, she'd take out her teeth and she'd put on the house dress and she'd be an old lady. She was an actress, phenomenal actress, and so funny. And when she's talking about old people, this one guy says, when I was old, I lived in the country. She says, when you were old, everybody lived in the country.
Now, I want to ask you, as I said, you've had an amazing career. Now, is it true you started off as a musician?
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
I was a working class musician. I grew up in the country. And when you grew up in the country, in fact, I just watched a show in South America. they have a thing called mita. In Brazil, they call it milonga. When it's everybody gets together and they have a dance, it's a milonga. Well, this is a mita. Well, a mita is when someone needs help doing something. The neighborhood has a mita, and everybody shows up, and everybody helps. And it's not done for money. It's done to help the other guy. And your only thing is when you need help, everybody will come out to help you. And I found that to be on so many levels how I lived when I was growing up in the country, because that's the way it was. One thing everybody had in common in the country was property. You know, that's why we never had garbage pickup, because there was no garbage to be had in the household. You see, when you grow up poor, you use everything. You know, even we had because we had outdoor plumbing. You know, we had to go down the about a half a mile to get water where the pump was. You know, where I could get a bag, a bucket of water, and that was the chores that we did. And then for heating, it was a wood stove, wood coal stove, and we had a little stash of wood that my dad would once a year he would buy us the lumber from the natives, and my dad was very Chinese, and he always looked for the bargain. You know, we never. I never had a steak until I was, I think, 23 years old, because if you bought a hunk of meat that big in a Chinese family, that got chopped up and it went into the dish and everybody shared. There's no such thing. This is your steak. Okay. No such thing. And so my dad, for firewood, he would buy firewood from the natives, but it's not chopped up. The natives would drag a tree and drop it off in front of the house. and okay, you had to have a saw and an axe, and there's your wood. So as I got older, and then, you know, like my son, you know, he's complaining about the homeless, you know, all the homeless this, homeless that, you know, and like he's what do you call it? He's young. An elite. That's what my son was. Well, when I grew up in the country, we had our cottage, but across the field, they weren't homeless, but they lived. What happened? The guy's wagon. He had a team of horses and a wagon, and when it was a covered wagon when they needed it, but he had to use the wagon to make a living, you know, with the horses. And so what he did, he started a lean-to across the field from us, and he would get lumber or whatever, pick it up on in the fields, what wasn't being used, and he built a lean-to, a structure, lived there, had 4 or 5 kids while he lived in the lean-to with his wife, and they had a kitchen stove, but it was a dirt floor, but he had a carpet over the dirt floor, but it was cozy, and because, you know, I was that young, I could wander around anywhere I wanted, and I'd always wander over there. And that's the guy. When he was over there one time, he pulled out a fiddle, and he started playing. He could play fiddle. Well, I had a guitar at home, and so I started learning how to play the guitar. and I could play good enough to back up the fiddle player. Well, then another fiddle player moved across in a real house, not the lean-to, but in a real house, and he found out again he needed a guitar player, so he found out that I could play guitar. I was 8 years old at the time, and I could play enough to help him with his fiddle playing. And so what I did, I became a backup guitar player at the early age of 8, 9, 10, 11, you know. So we'd play for parties. And I loved it because, you know, I was one of the band. You know, I was a kid with the band. And they'd say, give the kid a beer, you know, and I'd have a beer under my chair. I hated the taste, you know. I'd rather have a 7-Up, you know, or water. But it was give the kid a beer. Well, years later, I became an Army cadet. And then when I was an Army cadet, and guitar wasn't my instrument. My instrument was an accordion, which my cousin never played, and he had in his room. And every time we'd visit my cousin and my aunt, that I would go in the room and play the accordion. So much that one day I was going home and they had the accordion packed, and they gave it to me. They said, "Here." You got more use for it than my cousin. So when I was in Army Cadets, I started playing. I brought the accordion with me, but I never brought it up to play because I didn't like that all the attention, you know. And I wasn't that good. I could play for my own enjoyment, but I could play guitar. And so this other cadet, he became this is before Elvis. This is 53. And then when Elvis hit, then in 54, then the kid became an Elvis impersonator, and I was his backup guitar player. And because I learned how to keep rhythm really good, I became, you know, quite adept at being a backup guitar player. And then over the years, I started learning a little bit of soloing and, you know, learning a little bit more guitar. But my main job was rhythm, was keeping the rhythm. And so I was in demand, you know, because we, you know, that was before drummers, before, you know, that it was normal to have a drummer in the band. You know, especially in Western Canada, if you had a fiddle player and a guitar player, that's all you needed, you know. And so that's how I ended up playing music. And then I got hooked I got into dancing. I got into jive. It was In the Mood by Glenn Miller. Well, I went to a school dance one time, and there's this really good-looking bad guy, you know, with the big draped pants and long hair, and he's jiving away, and the girls were loving him, and he was handsome, and so he became my, you know, I had a role model now, you know, so I learned how to dance, and so I've been, so once I learned how to dance, and I found out the power of a dancer is enormous. If you know how to dance, you have girls lined up to dance with you, and I'm talking about the foxiest women in the joint. They're like, whoa, you know, forget it. This guy is cute or not. He can dance. He can make me look good. And so I learned how to dance before, you know, while I was in school. But I was shy. I was very shy. I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And I found out later how racist it was. Probably one of the most racist places on the planet after the Second World War. You know, in fact, outside of Calgary was a little town called Olds, and that was the first Holocaust denier. The guy was always preached that the Holocaust was never happened. You know, that kind of mentality, and that's where I grew up. I grew up in that kind of area there, and so as a minority, which I definitely was. I was half Chinese. I still am half Chinese. And I found out later that I'm part Native, at which my parents, especially my mother, my dad never really talked. He was Chinese, and he'd show up and leave, and never said goodbye, never said hello, never said goodbye. Just he'd appear and then he'd disappear. But my mother, she was like the matriarch of the family, and when she was in the sanitarium for TB for 5 years of my life, I didn't see her until she was, till I was 7, 8 years old, when she finally came home, and then I had a mother and father. But my whole existence, being half Chinese and being shy, and I had an older brother. And my older brother was also shy, but he was the one that took the brunt of all the beatings. He was the one that was treated really bad because he was half Chinese, and because we were in a home for a while, an orphanage, and he had to go to the public school from the home. And so there was a stigma on that back in the days. You talk about bullies. There was bullies that scared the shit out of teachers. And because back in the day, there was no like trade schools or anything like that. There, in living in the country, kids would be taken out of school to work on the farm. We need you to harvest. So a lot of there were like 18-year-olds trying to get through grade 3 or 4. And so there was like this weirdness of adults basically, and bullies. And that was you just stayed out of sight more than anything. And if you looked different or acted different in any way, you were signaled out. So that I learned how to stay under the fire, the eyesight of these people. Because when you live in a racist country like that, there's no protection, and if the racists zero in on you for whatever reason, that's why the best is to stay invisible, just don't be noticed. And that's basically what I did most of my life. And then as I got older, I got mouthier. But luckily I had an older brother that scared the shit out of most people. Well, my first day, let me tell you, my first day in grade school, like we're out of the country. In the country, we had to walk the mile or through the fields and everything to get to the country school. But when we moved into the city, I was just down it was like a half a mile away, and you could walk to school with your friends, and there was no secrets. Everybody knew who everybody was, and my first day in the grade school, I had an encounter with a bully. The teacher's sitting there at the desk, and she's sipping her tea, and this bully came in where I was sitting and right over to me and started smacking me around the head, just for no reason other than I was brown. I was a little brown guy. Well, the bully had no idea that I had an older brother, 3 years older than me. And that meant big, strong, mean. And when he heard what the bully did to me, the teacher never did anything, but my brother sure did. And back in the day, when I went to school there was a place called the Water Tower. It was next to the school. And they had like a chain link fence supposedly around it. But that's where the kids would go to fight. There's a fight after school almost every day. So it was like MMA fighting. And the kids would make a circle, and then guys, combatants would get in the middle of the ring and just duke it out. And my brother, because he was so mean, and he scared the shit out of most of everybody. And then he became a football player. So he was like a star football player on there. And he was tough as nails. And so that kind of saved me. But with me, because I had a big mouth, You know, I don't know where I got it from. I don't know, but anyway, I would say things that weren't weren't the best PG thing, but you know, thanks to my brother, I managed. And then when my brother wasn't around, I would get along with the bully. I'd make the bully laugh, and that's what saved me. But it was my humor and then my musical ability. Then when I got in playing, especially with Elvis, playing Elvis impersonator, because when you start moving like Elvis, all the girls, I mean, the girls were like, ah. I mean, picture this Elvis impersonator, full-blooded Sarsi native kid. You know, he would look like a native, but when he started moving, you know, moving his hips, moving his legs, and that, like Elvis, the girls would go crazy. And so I started my musical career in front of girls, you know, and so I knew what you had to do in order to do it, and that really made up for my lack of musicianship.
Now, okay, so you're a musician and you're loving the girls. I got to ask you though, so how do you end up doing comedy? Because I did stand-up comedy for 8 years, and we all wanted to be musicians. No one ever went from being a musician to a comic. They would be like, well, God, we would love to be a musician. But how did that happen? Like, how did you and Cheech and Chong start? What got you out of music?
I'll tell you some secrets. George Carlin played piano in a band before he ever did any comedy. George was a rock and roll musician. Carlin was not Richard Pryor, but yeah. I mean, the thing is, I was lucky. Like I said, I never really spoke. I never really talked, even when I played music. Yeah, I was too busy playing music, you know. And the microphone. The most we ever did was, and we always had a singer. And the singer was doing all the announcing and everything else. I never got on the mic. And when I did, once in a while, I would say, we'll be right back. We're going to take an intermission. We'll be right back. And that was it. That was it. It wasn't until I started, we got discovered by Motown. You know, we finally put a band together that really worked with a singer. We got discovered by Motown. And when I went to Motown, I wrote the lyrics for a song called Does Your Mama Know About Me? And it was an interracial kind of thing. And it was a poem first. And I wanted the poem to be, it was a poem about being mixed. And, you know, does your mama know about me? Does she know what I am? Will she turn her back on me or accept me as a man? And so I had a fellow musician, composer, that he saw that, and he was trying to get Bobby, our singer, to sing his other songs. But when he saw my poem, he says, "Can I finish this?" And I said, "Sure." So he took it home and put the music to it, and he wrote a bridge to it, you know. And so we got a hit song right away. We got a hit song. But as soon as we got with Motown, they started treating everybody like a musician. Well, I'm not the best musician, but and so when we recorded it, I wasn't even on the album as a guitar player. I was on the album. I wasn't on the album, period. I was a writer, and that's when I found out writers, there no respect for writers. I mean, you know, Hemingway, you know, he had a hard time getting respect, you know, because writers, everybody, you make it sound so easy that anybody could have wrote it. You know what I mean? I mean, that's what, because what you did the Rubik's Cube. You did it. It works, you know. But it looks so simple. Anybody can do that, you know. And that's what writing is, you know. They thought, well, especially the singers in there, you know, they didn't give a shit about who wrote the lyrics, you know. The fact is that they sang, and that's the main thing with those guys. But while I was on the road with the Motown, I didn't go to the blues clubs because, I grew up in clubs. I wasn't really interested in, I knew how these guys played as good as they did. They had incredibly strong hands, and that's all they could do is play lead guitar. Well, I'm a poet more than anything. I was not a guitar player. And so I started going to Second City. Second City was the first improv club that I ever went to. And I saw Peter Boyle on stage. I saw these great actors on stage in Chicago. And then I went to San Francisco. That's when I saw the committee. Well, the committee was like, whoa, I mean, all these great actors, Howard Hessman, and all these great guys, Gottlieb, Carl Gottlieb, Sellers, all these great actors. And so in my mind, being a musician, I could hear a song and learn it, figure out what you had to do. And so comedy, I started doing that with jokes. I figured out how to do it that way. And then when I went to Canada, I got fired from Motown, back to work in the nightclubs, and I created an improvisational nightclub at a strip bar, with the girls as actresses, and that was a stroke of genius. In fact, all the girls, none of them went on to become actresses. They could have, but they stayed there for the money. But Cheech and I, that's where we owned our act, in the strip club. And Cheech was just a sideman. He was like, he was actually hired to do be the straight guy, because I had another partner named Dave that had long hair. And there was two long hairs, and we needed one guy with short hair, and that was Richard. That was Cheech. But when the group broke up, Cheech was the only one that wanted to keep doing it. And so we hooked up together and became Cheech and Chong. And, of course, the rest is history.
Yeah, tell me, how... It's so funny because, you think about it, you guys were so huge. It's something that... But you come from Calgary. How was your path to become so big? Were you just... when I did stand up, we would play every shit gig. We would drive from Philly to Ohio and be on the road for 12 days. And some nights you'd be in a great hotel. Some nights you'd be in a converted trailer park. And it was just the grind. And you would drive 5 hours and get up on stage. But you did it because you loved it. How was your guys? How did you start building a following? Because you were in Calgary and that's not known, you became huge in Hollywood. How did that all happen?
Well, again, we came from, I didn't know, when I met Cheech up in Canada, no one knew what he was. We had no idea that he was Mexican. And he wouldn't let anybody know. It was Richard Marin was his name. We got back to LA. Now we come down to LA because, I wanted to be in LA. I fell in love with Los Angeles when I was with Motown. And so I'd worked a few of the black clubs. So I knew that we could get work in the black clubs as comedians, because the black clubs, they pay, $25, $30 or $50 if you're lucky, or $100 if you're really lucky. We made a nice little, a bit of change, but what happened when we got to LA, the comedy clubs were fine, the freebies especially, they loved us. But when we got hired by this promoter, he wanted it was a dance club. He wanted to start doing a little bit of comedy in it. And so he hired us, and we thought we had a steady gig. And it was a dance club. And so the dancers had to stop dancing to watch our show. And they weren't a happy camper, because, they're there to dance. They're not there to watch a couple of idiots, on stage. And so our act never went over that well in the first show. And so we're backstage, and, my instinct told me that, we're not doing very well, Cheech. There must be a character that that everybody's going to jump on and love. And she said, well, there is one, but I'm not really into doing it. That's why. It's kind of detrimental to the Latino, the Chicano race. And I told him, I said, Cheech, come on, we're in that, that's our business. That's our job, And so he did a bit called the lowrider. He showed me a lowrider. And then I remembered a bit that a black comedian named Sir Pineapple from Seattle used to do, where he would sit in a car and pretend he was driving a car, and then he'd wave and stop. He would just do all the pantomime about, peeping his horn and having the big guy come out of the car and look up at him, and then, it was very beautiful. And so I showed Cheech how to do the car bit. And then, so Cheech caught on right away. And next thing you know, we discovered the lowrider. And then I was always doing the hippie, the stoner. And so together, we the first time we did the bit, I could feel the electricity in the air, because now you got a crowd that did not want to see us. Now you got a crowd sitting there, they can't get enough of us. They loved it so much because we're right in Encino. We were in Encino, California. That lowriders, in fact, we got the character because one lowrider pulled up. We're outside the club, and he pulled up in his lowrider. Hey, man, can you tell me where Encino? Yeah. You can tell me where Encino is? Yeah, you're on it, man. It's here. Oh, hey, thanks, man. And he drove away. And she said, laugh. We laughed at each other. But then when we did it that night, and Cheech goes, hey, man, hey, Red Brick, want to ride, man? Come on, hop in, The crowd, everybody went, wow. Wow, they never saw that before. And to Cheech's credit, we did it for, 3-4 movies. And then it was over. Cheech had grown over out of it. And when I look back at our early show, we were right now we couldn't do the same show anymore. The way the political system is now and everything.
When I was listening to the album, I noticed that there was stuff that you couldn't get away with now in the wedding album. But it's funny because, as someone I'm very open-minded, this stuff's just funny. I mean, to me, it's not offensive at all. It's just, listening to it. It's just funny.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it was. We had the ability to do that, because the whole point of comedy is to make people laugh. And the more ridiculous you laugh, that's why our comedy hit so many kids. Because it's that age, you want to laugh. You don't give a shit about anything else, but you just want to laugh. You want to laugh hard. You want to laugh at stupid things, and not only laugh but learn at the same time. And you can be funny. The first time I ever made love, the first time that I had my cherry broken, I remember everything about it, including the girl's name, which I won't mention because I know better. But when we finished the first time, and I'd been close to doing it with a few people, but growing up in the country, it's not, you got to be very careful, and so I waited till I guess I was 16, 17, when I finally got my first bit. No, I was 18, 17. No, I was 17, 16. I was 16 years old. Well, anyway, we did the deed. And then I laughed so hard because it was so funny. That the way everybody was. It was on the side of a hill. I remember trying to dig in my toes so I wouldn't slide down the hill. And of course, the girl was not happy that I was laughing so hard. She never got the joke, but it was a celebration laugh. Like, I did it, finally did it, It wasn't my favorite way of making love, thank God, or I would have been fathering so many kids around, As it was, I did one extramarital baby. I was one of those. I was a true musician. I had my daughter at our wedding.
Now, I'm going to ask you. Something, because we're talking about laughter, and your character, the hippie guy, made so many people laugh. How did you find our character? Where did it come from? Because you played it so well, but every character comes, like as you said, Cheech didn't want to do that character, but then he did it. Where did you find the hippie guy? Where did that come from?
His name is Strawberry. I was walking. Now, as I was in the process of changing the strip club into an improvisational club, I was in Vancouver at the time. They had a garbage strike. There's bags of garbage all over the streets, piled up in these piles. There's a light snowfall falling, and there was a street lamp right above this bag of garbage, bags of garbage, that this hippie kid with long red hair, long overcoat, looked like a Dickens character. He had a long overcoat, and the hair came down, and he's sitting on the garbage, and he goes, he saw me looking at him, and he goes, "Hey man, do you know where I could crash tonight?" And I looked at him, and I said, "Yeah, maybe I do." And he goes, "Oh, that'd be great, man." And so I told him I'm putting a nightclub together, improv club. And I said, "Yeah, I could, you could stay there, until you get a place. You sleep in the light booth, And he goes, "Oh, that'd be great, man." And so he became our light man, Strawberry. And because he had that stoner attitude, he was a little bit slow on the lights when we needed blackouts. And so everybody would be freezing in place and go, "Strawberry, blackout." And Cheech, at the time, that's when Cheech joined the group. And so Cheech had a thing with Strawberry. David Graham had a thing with Strawberry. Strawberry was the voice of reason. Like, we'd do a bit, we'd try a new bit, and then we'd come backstage because he was working the lights from backstage. He would critique us. He would say, "Oh man, that bit sucked, man. Nobody laughed, man. That was embarrassing. Whoa." And so Strawberry became such a character that when Cheech and I got together, boom, I just grabbed that character because of his honesty. And you know what? He changed. I went back years later, of course, it was very monumental, because the people that started the improv club, they're right off the street, and, we're just doing our thing. And so when Cheech and I made it to the big top, all these people that had anything to do, they came up, we had a little get together, where we all get together. And so I met Strawberry, and he changed 180 degree. He had those big Brogan shoes on. Before that, he was barefoot or sandals. He had these big lawyer type shoes on. He was a businessman. His short hair. Everything had changed. He had changed. He'd grown into an adult, But then I guess his hippie past was like, it was totally in the past. But he was one of those guys that when he became something, it was bigger than life, you know. And that's the way I found it. They very seldom stay in that one mode, you know. You're like that for a teenager, then all of a sudden you're somebody else as you get older, and someone else, and so on. You know, he became his father, actually. He was funny, man. He had a girlfriend. He used to attract really beautiful girls, and the girls were like ethereal, kind of hippie, you know, those almost like they're not even real. You know, they had little chiffon, little silky things to wear, and incredible bodies, and just young and gorgeous, and hippie chicks for days. Yeah, that was an era.
Now that era, because your character, you found that character. How did you guys get your first record deal? How did that come about? Because what's funny is I listen to WMMR in Philadelphia, and every year they still play Santa Claus and his old lady.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
something that is played, and I look forward to it. And I'm one of those people that I have Amazon Music. I can listen to anything, but I want to hear it on the radio. Because there's nothing like, it's that, and it's Springsteen, Santa Claus is coming to town. Then it makes me feel like it's Christmas. When I lived in L.A. for 20 years, it was different. Here, you're driving, and you hear that. When did you start deciding to record stuff? Did the record companies come after you? Was that Lou Adler, or how did that happen?
We did we did like an audition for Warner Brothers at the Troubadour. And Cheech and I were regulars at the Troubadour, even though we never got paid. But we got such a reputation that every Monday was a hootenanny night. And what Cheech and I found out was that folk clubs were the best place to do comedy, because the folk singers set everybody up. They're quiet, they're listening, they're mellow. You know what I mean? They're not having a party at their table. They're listening. And then you come on and do comedy. Well, they're the best audience, you know, because anybody sit through some poor fucker with a guitar, singing, you know, and sit there, and then after you applaud and want to hear more. Well, when we hit them with comedy, I mean, the Troubadour, they just lapped it up to the point where they would phone me. I mean, we weren't getting paid. We had in the beginning, we had to stand in line to sign up, so we would be the good part, to come on at a good night, a part of the night. And so if you were there early, you got to go on sixth, and it would go backwards. And then, but opening up, they hardly had the doors open, to be on the first on stage. And so if you were the sixth, you were the star area. And so that's what we did at the Troubadour. And then when Lou Adler came to, he sort of sat in on the freebie that was done for the other guy, Templeton, who was not interested in us. But we heard that Lou Adler was interested. He liked what he saw because he grew up in Boyle Heights, and he was that's a Chicano area, so he knew all about that. Plus, he was a master promoter. He did the Monterey Pop Festival, and he did all these masterful guy, and that's what we needed. And so we went to see Lou, and Lou says, "What can I do for you?" Well, I looked at his records, and I hadn't thought about it until we got to his office, and I said, "You know what? We'd like to make a comedy record." And Lou says, "Great. What do you need?" I said, $1,000. And Lou started writing out the check. I says, "Well, make it $2,000. There's two of us." and so Lou said, "Okay." And so I says, "And I need a tape recorder. I need a little tape recorder because you need something. When people say, 'What do you need?' Come up with something. I learned that real fast." And so we got a little tape recorder, and then we went into a little back room to rehearse. And it was during the rehearsal that we created Dave's Not Here, because Cheech went out, he got in costume, everything like we do on stage, and he went out, and he knocked on the door, and I was supposed to open the door and let him in. But I wasn't sure if the tape recorder was working. And besides, I was behind the console, and the door is way over there. And so I instead of opening the door and letting him in, when he knocked, I go, "Who is it?" And so then we started the bit. He goes, "It's me, man. I got the stuff." And so on. But I would never let him in. Because I seen the humor, the tension, the humor. And so I kept him out there as long as I could keep him out there. And then when I finally let him in, he was ready to kill me. but by that time, we had recorded probably the most iconic Cheech and Chong bit out there today. And it was done, no rehearsal, just ad-lib right from the beginning. And then when we recorded the one that was on the record, we went into the studio. We had a whole crew. We had the engineers and everybody else, like a whole setup. But the Dave's Not Here, it took, 2.5, 3 minutes. And we got there, the whole studio. And so Lou said, "You got anything else?" And so we had to make up shit on the spot, which we did. We did Blind Melon Children. I think we did another one. But right then, and so that's when I found out, First of all, I told Lou we don't need a big studio. All we need is an engineer and a little mix-down room, like we rehearsed a bit. And that's the way Cheech and I did our record career. For that lasted almost 10 years. I think we did nine albums.
Now, how hard, okay, so you had the albums, so then you transitioned to these movies, which anyone, I'm 50, I'm 58, and we all watched the Cheech and Chong movies. We all love the Cheech and Chong movies. I mean, we remember laughing, and that's when for a lot of us, it's our first time experiencing pot. So it was cool to us. But how did the movie deals come about? Was it because your comedy was doing so big, and then you were in Hollywood, they just said, "Hey, let's make a movie with these guys"?
No. Not at all. It never works that way. No, what happened, I got tired of missing summer. Because by that time, we were like an international act. And we'd go to Australia every chance we got, which was during their winter, we'd be in Australia. It would be summer here, but it would be winter there. We're in Australia. We'd come back here, it'd be winter here. And so we missed 3 summers of going to Australia. And so I said, I said, we better get off the road. We better do a movie. And so I was writing a movie with another writer in the meantime. And it was going to be an animated movie at first. We talked about it, but then Lou got involved, making the movie deal. And once Lou Adler got involved, he worked his way up. We had Floyd Mitrix hired to direct. He had done American Graffiti and a few other those hot rod shows. But Cheech and I never hit it off with Floyd. In fact, we never hit it off with any writer or producers ever. And so then I wrote a song called Up in Smoke. And when I played it for Cheech and Lou, Cheech says, "That's the title. That's the movie, Up in Smoke." And then with the title, started writing. I started writing the rest of the movie. And we kind of wrote as we went along, like we did our records. We'd come up with an idea that day or in the truck or whatever. And we'd tell Lou, "Okay, here's what we're going to do." We'd shoot the sequence, and then. But to Lou's credit, he got us Robert Altman's movie guys, and Robert Altman was very famous for doing improvisational movies, where MASH and all that. But a lot of it was improv, and the actors wrote the lines basically, and so. We got a lot of Robert Altman's people involved in Up in Smoke. And then, unfortunately, it was Up in Smoke that broke up Cheech and Chong and Lou Adler. Because Lou when we couldn't get along with the one director, Lou says, well, then, Paramount would feel right if he directed it. Lou Adler directed it. And he said, it was like, of course, I'll just direct whatever you guys write, And so I hate to blow my own horn, but no one else will, And so I really have to take credit for writing most of Up in Smoke, But I also give credit to the actors like Strother Martin, who they wrote their own bits. We give them a scenario, and then these actors, because you talk about improvisational actors, these were the best. Stacy Keach as Sergeant Stadenko, he wrote his own lines. I wrote some for the minor people, Toyota, the one, but the whole plot of the movie, the band made out of weed. I wrote all that. I wrote that. I wrote most of the movie, if not all the movie, and then Lou put it together, but he thought he had his own. He came up with his idea of an ending, and then it showed you that Lou really was not, not the movie guy. And the ending he had, he showed it to us in the rough cut. You never want to do that in the movie. It's like a lawyer. You never want to ask a question unless you know what the answer is going to be. Right. And so that was that with Lou. And so when I saw, his pathetic attempt at the ending, that's when we broke Lou. And I took over as the director. And then after that, I directed every movie after that.
Did you just, when you directed him, did you just follow your instinct? Because it's a lot to direct. People don't understand, because you're directing yourself, which I know you're a performer, you're creative, so we're much harder on ourselves. People can say, "Oh, that was great." We'll go, But how did you just start? Did you just go by instinct and know that?
Well, it was the same as Dave's Not Here. That bit. It's the same thing. What it is, you get characters, and then you find out a way to make those characters funny. You see, we're doing a documentary right now, and it's being done, but I've got no creative input into it. And that's the way the documentarians wanted to do it. I have a hard time watching anything that I'm in that I don't have something to do with it. The writing or the directing. I have a hard time with that. In fact, I'm in the 70s show, for instance, was very easy. They wrote for my character, the writers did, and I never ad-libbed one line in that 70s show. I know how to act when I'm a bit character, but when it's on me as Cheech and Chong, then I have to take over. I have to be the guy, because the inspiration comes from a very, very personal, deep space, and it's unlike anything you're going to see anywhere. It comes right out of the well, of the creative well, and that's, I've been doing it all my life, and I don't see any reason to change that. Like right now, we like I said, we got a documentary, but I haven't seen it. I haven't seen any of it, and my son Paris tried to inject a little bit in there, but he got turned down by the movie's locked down. And the thing is with movies, I totally understand. That's why Lou and I split after Up in Smoke, is because you can't have two cooks in the kitchen. It's got to be one guy, and that's the way it's been with me. I'm not the best businessman in the world. In fact, I'm probably very low on the totem pole that way. But on the other hand, it was because of my creative input that in a way, poverty really promotes creativity because when you need to make some money, you know, you need to get people laughing hard, you know, then you take care of business. But all my life, I've never really done, like I said earlier about the meta, you know, where you have a meta where everybody gets together and you work out whatever problems you have together. And then you have a big party after to celebrate and pay people off with parties or food or something like that. That's more my style, you know. And I leave the money-making things up to my wife, who is excellent. My son also, who is very excellent. And so they take care of that side of it for me. But I can't bridge the two, you know, the money-making thing and the creative thing. To me, if you do a very funny, creative movie, then the money will take care of itself. Now, we've been robbed, obviously. You know, we got robbed with Up in Smoke. But the good news is it kept us in the business, you see. A lot of times, you know, people make that one movie and make all that money, and then they're out of the business. You know, they're out trying to make a fortune doing shit that they have no business doing. You know, and eventually they end up going, whoa, you know, I better get back to where I know what I'm doing. You know? So I don't know. I'm just a creature of happenstance. You know, whatever happens, I just go along with it.
Well, you know, Up in Smoke, we were talking about that. You know, you guys had the persona, the marijuana smokers. When did you personally start smoking marijuana? Was it something that you learned before the character, or is it something that once you started doing the character, you started smoking more?
I got my early pot experiences from a jazz musician. In fact, in Calgary, where I grew up, the only nightlife was a privately owned jazz club. And if you were a musician, you got in free if you brought your axe. You know, you brought your instrument with you, they let you in. And so I hung out at this jazz club. And it was one of the founders of the jazz club that actually brought me a present when I was 17 years old. And I was still in school, barely. I got turned on to Lenny Bruce. He brought me an album, a Lenny Bruce album, and a marijuana cigarette, you know, a joint. And I put the joint in my pocket, took the record, thank you for the record. And so he lit up his own joint. And then he handed me, and it was the first time I ever smoked. I took a toke, and I've never been able to duplicate that high since. It was one of the greatest highs of my life. I heard music for the first time. I've never heard music like that. And I can still remember the tune. It was Ornette Coleman's Lonely Woman. I'll never forget that. I've got a good memory when it comes to things like that. Because so much of my life has been very ordained, you know, it's been very spiritually led. You know, I've been led into these areas, and so I remember every little detail, especially getting high the first time, because I took that Lenny Bruce record home with the joint, and then I would take a couple of tokes and put it out. I still do that now. That's what this is. I'll light up. I'll take a couple of tokes, and then I'll put it in one of my joint holders, and I'll set it down, you know, and it'll go up by itself. And then in a few moments later, you know, I'll light it up again and smoke again, you know.
What?
But my weed, I was, like I said, I was 17 at the time. I wasn't sure. about it, and it was a big secret in Calgary, and so no one smoked, and in the band, no one would tell the other band members, oh yeah, we met one time in the alley, and the organ player, piano player, and myself, you're here too, and we used to meet, getting our stash, getting our joint, because back in the day, there was dealers that would sell individual little pinners, little marijuana dust joints, and they cost $1 a piece. And the guy would, he'd roll up 10 and make $10. $10 back then was it would get you a couple of meals, And so that's how it was always music or comedy. The reason to smoke, it was never. I never had the luxury of having so much pot that I could just light up whenever I felt like it. It was like that one little joint, and because it wasn't addicting, you never saw me looking around the ashtray for butts, or anything like that.
I got to ask you, because you're the pot smoker and the party. Tell me some stories about when you guys were at the top of your success. I mean, like when you were huge in the 80s, what was the LA party scene like? I mean, it must have been insane, because I moved out in like 2000. I moved out there, but you hear about what was it like for you guys? The group, people always trying to give you pot. I mean, what was it like when you would go to parties?
It was more in those days. My brother-in-law was the drummer for the Three Dog Night band. And the Three Dog Night actually seen the whole improv group that I had in Canada, because they were up there playing the big arenas, and we had our little strip joint club going down there, which we opened up. The last time we put the group together was for the Three Dog Night. They never saw the show, and so we were, when we came to LA, because of my brother-in-law and we hooked up with those kind of rock and roll people, Lou Adler, and and the Roxy, and the Johnny, what's it, the other club?
Rainbow?
The
Rainbow?
The Rainbow, and the other one, the Whiskey a Go-Go. I never, but Cheech hung with those people a lot. And of course, there's the parties. Well, the Lou Adler party, when we signed with Lou, the first thing we did was got invited to a party Lou Adler was having at his house, and the Stones were there, some of the Beatles were there, Jack Nicholson was the in crowd. They were all there, and when I was there, I asked Lou, I said, where can I smoke this big fat stinky joint? And Lou said, in the bedroom. Go in the bedroom. So I walked in the bedroom, I lit up the joint, and I look over, and there's John Lennon sitting on the floor, not on the bed, on the floor. And I walked over and handed him the joint, and he goes, no, man, I got immigration problems. I can't smoke right now. Okay. And so then Rod Stewart walks in. And Rod Stewart's in the mirror, and he's fluffing his hair up, So I walked over and said, Rod, you want to get high? And he goes, no, my voice. And so then I put out the joint, and then I walked out into the hallway, and I run into Jack Nicholson. And Nicholson had just did a movie, A Few Good Men.
Yeah.
Remember that one? And in the movie, he plays an army guy, and he's in the mirror. He's combing his hair, and Jack's got the real thin hair. And in the military cut, there's nothing to comb. But the scene went on for a good 10 minutes. And I'm stoned, and I got Jack Nicholson. And I said, Jack, that scene in the movie where you're combing your hair. And I said, you took like forever. I said, and you got no hair to comb. It's weird. I said, was that an ad lib? Was that improv? And Jack just looked at me, And he said, "Excuse me, you're in my way." And he brushed me aside, and he went into the bedroom, I guess, to smoke his own joint or whatever.
Now, through your marijuana, you came out with a bong line, and that got you in legal trouble. Tell my listeners what happened with that.
Well, what I learned a couple of things. First of all, just because you're famous, you don't escape racism, you know. And when they went see what happened. Bush was getting ready to attack Iraq. Bush was so ready to do something against these terrorists, you know, and so his war crowd said that, well, you're going to need some diversion, you know, like Nixon had the hippies. See, if it wasn't for the hippies, the war probably would have been over sooner. But the hippies kind of kept the right wing guys, you know, going against these anti-war protesters and so on. And so when it came to Bush's Iraqi war, they needed hippies. But there was none around. The only thing that was around was my bong company. And what the Joe Biden had wrote a law, you know, outlawing paraphernalia, making it a federal offense to deal with paraphernalia, drug paraphernalia. And so when they went after me, what they did, they knew they were treading on you know, uncharted territories, you know, going after pipe maker, you know, but that was all they had. And so they put out a hit on the people that made cigarette papers for the joints. And what they did, they put out a lie saying that billions of dollars were being funneled to the Al-Qaeda terrorists through the sale of bongs. They said the bongs sales were in the billions they're in the billions of dollars and blah blah blah, and I was like, what? Are you serious? and sure enough, next thing you know, they're coming after me, and next thing you know, I'm in jail because everybody got house arrest except me, and it took me a while to realize the name Chong. See, they're at war with China. They're at war with Korea. You know, America's at war with Al-Qaeda, you know, the terrorist. And if you got a name Chong, you know, it's jail time, basically. And so I went in front of a judge, and I tried to weasel my way out. You know, I tried to tell him, you know, that, you know, I know I did wrong selling bongs and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I'm involved in teaching kids how to dance salsa. And I try to be a good, and I am. I'm very, but what they did, I see what they did. I got a juvenile record. Now, so they're not supposed to look at your juvenile record, but come on. You know, the FBI, the cops, they look at everything. You know, there's no, you know, they don't follow rules. They never have. You know, what can we get on this guy that can put him in jail? And that's what they did. They looked at my juvenile record. They found out that I had a brush with the law, and that my name is Chong, and therefore I should do 9 months in jail. And the thing is, I even had a chance to get a pardon from Biden. I mean, from Obama, because Cheech went there to accept the Chicano whatever achievement award, and while he was there, he mentioned to Obama, who knew who Cheech and Chong were, by the way, because he was a dope smoker from Hawaii. And so he knew Cheech and Chong right off the bat. And so he told Cheech, he said, tell him to fill out the forms and I'll definitely give him a pardon, you know. But I look at the bus now as a badge of honor. and it's given me a platform in order to. I helped really. It helped get pod legal because I brought attention to the fact that you're putting guys in jail for a water pipe. That's not even his company. There's obviously a reason why you're putting him in jail, and it sure doesn't have anything to do with protecting the nation from anybody, and because I was such a beloved comedian for all these years, with the movies and everything, it was like, what are you doing? And in fact, it kind of backfired on him. Well, but it did. We got it legal.
What was it like in jail? I know your roommate was the Wolf of Wall Street. That must have been interesting.
Jail was probably, well, what I did, I turned it into a spiritual retreat. Purposely. I had been studying spirituality basically all my life. Once I got into the world of jazz, that's where you're going to find some very beautiful spiritual beings, because when you achieve that level of musicianship, it's like a doctorate in humanity, because jazz music itself, what it is, it's interpreting music using intelligence. And when you use intelligence in anything, math or any of the the arts, you're running into spirituality, because that's where it all comes from, and that's what I learned, and what I learned with the spiritual. I got turned on spirituality really young, and it's always stayed with me, because when I was a kid, I never had a mom and dad like everybody else. My mother was in a sanitarium. My dad had just got out of the war, and he had issues, and so I went into the hospital because I had a little bit of a pleurisy in my lung, and that's because my mother had TB, and so all the family was, we were vetted really closely, looked at, and they found a little spot on my lung. So I ended up in the hospital for about a year, and then I got out of the hospital and went right into a orphanage, right into a Salvation Army home. And so, in Salvation Army home, everything starts off with a hymn, with a Christian. It was a little militant, kind of awkward Christian soldiers marching off to war. It was that kind of thing, but it put the emphasis on the Bible and on the rule of spirituality, of that I touched on that, and being young enough, and then growing up in the country when my mother got out of the hospital, my dad, was got a little home in the country. The only entertainment we had, that's in the 40s. The only entertainment anybody had back then was church. It was the only reason you got dressed up. You put on your Sunday school best, and we went to Sunday school. And so so when you're that young and in Sunday school, it'll take the power of prayer, for instance. I learned that really, really young, and respect it to this day, because I owe everything. All my successes was divinely inspired, and I've known that, and I've never got out of it. And so when I went to prison, it was like, and there is a section of prisons that are devoted really mainly to the study of the Bible and God. That's how those guys maintain. You see, you can't if you don't have that to go to lean on, then you're in trouble. You won't last. But in order to last, that's what I did. Well, I always looked at like Nelson Mandela. who did something like 18 years in hard labor, breaking rocks, and being a black man in South Africa in jail, and yet he came out of it and became the premier of South Africa. And so I looked at that, and then I had one bad half hour in jail, and that was, everything was fine. Vanity Fair sent a limousine to take me to prison, and so I arrived in prison in a limousine, and fanfare and everything else. But that night, when I had to crawl into that little bunk bed, the bottom bunk, and I had a guy with a sleep problem on the top bunk, and I could hear all the moans and groans and sounds of, it was like 200 men in a dormitory, so you can imagine the sounds. It freaked me out because I went from the beautiful Palisades home, with a king-size bed and a gorgeous wife, to a little bunk bed. I turn over and there's a cement wall there, and reality hit. And like I said, and then I heard the key turn. I heard the door being locked, and I got a little claustrophobic, thinking, oh my, something happens, that door is locked. There's no escape, that kind of thing. Panic went through my mind. But then I felt the warmness come over me. And it was like a warm, like a blanket. And I just felt comfort. I felt the spiritual, which I felt all my life growing up. I could feel it. The minute you put your thoughts on a spirituality, there's a warmth that comes over your whole being, because this is really who we are, and we're here in a human form to experience everything, and that's what I was experiencing. That put me, that jail put me as close to God as I've ever been. And when you're that close, the miracles that happen, they happen before your eyes. I mean, I ended up with I went to the dining room just for the experience, but because I was one of the elite famous prisoners, we had our own special area where this golf caddy named Eric Larson, he's on the tour now, he cooked, him and his buddies cooked a gourmet vegetarian meal every night, and we ate in the TV room. And so we had our own private dining room with a bank of television sets on the wall. We could watch sports, we could watch anything we want. And we ate from the garden, the vegetable garden, and the healthiest food 9 months. I came out of there looking like a movie star. I had a tan, I had the right, when the inmates, they give me a haircut that lasted 2 hours. And the best barber in town, he's like, every little hair. I come out of there and I'm tan, buffed from working out. And my wife looked at me and goes, whoa. And we got a video of it. There's a AKA Tommy Chong video showing me getting out of jail, because they shot us. They shot me going into jail and shot me coming out. And so that experience probably was 9 months. It was probably the most influential for my life, for me, because everything fell into place. I mean, my wife, for instance, she cried, when I went in, and then we discussed that we got we got real estate holdings in Canada, and so she went up to Canada and parlayed the holdings that we had, the house that we had, we paid cash for it, into two 20-unit apartment buildings, and two houses that she fixed up in nice nice areas and flipped while I was in jail. All this when I was in jail. More money. Right now, we're still getting it. That it was because I was out of the, it was no longer, I was no longer the breadwinner. She was in there raking it in. And when I got out of jail, I went right up there, and we stayed at one of the nice homes that she had bought. There was no bed or anything, so we bunked out in the front room next to the fireplace. But it was like I was so rewarded. Now here's this gorgeous creature of mine making more money than I made, and you talk about someone that was blessed. There's a blessing. I mean, every day I look at her. Every day, it's amazing. Well, everybody's amazed. We were in a restaurant the other day, and the guy came over to me, and he was drunk, and he knew who we were, and he knelt down and he kissed my ring like I was a pope. And then he looks at Shelby and he goes, "You are so beautiful." No, she goes, "Oh, thank you." She goes, "No, you don't understand. You guys been together for over 50 years, and look at you. You're so beautiful." And you can't argue with that. What are you going to say?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at pictures of her now, and she's been in my life ever since she was 16 years old. And the reason we stayed together was that I was married. And so she thought that I was safe. I could never fall in love with her. I was married, I'm happily married, and we were just friends. We were just going to be friends until we did acid one night, and then she got pregnant, and we've never been apart. Other than we had to be apart, when I went to jail. But other than that, I mean, that's it. That's my life.
You've lived a great life. I got to ask you though, what's in the future? I know the '90s show is that all wrapped now? That's coming out, or what's up with that?
I'm shooting it tomorrow. Actually, I shoot another episode tomorrow. They're starting off like it's an unknown show. They don't know it's going to be a success and blah blah blah, and they're lowballing the shit out of me. But it's okay because my part's so simple. The future, I got to tell you, man, I'm really excited because I've been, like I say, I've been blessed in so many ways. I'm blessed now with some ideas that is going to help humanity in such a way. When I was not only just in prison, but when I got out, when I'm sitting here, in the every once in a while, I'll zone in on certain things. My son, he keeps me off Twitter. For a while there, I was going too crazy on Twitter, and so he pulled me off that. And my job really is to come up with solutions to our situations, because it's kind of ridiculous this day and age, and with the especially when we have our artificial intelligence. The only thing I heard about artificial intelligence was kind of negative, where people are saying, well, everybody's going to, pretty soon you don't have to do anything. Everything will be done for you. And that's wrong. That's bad. Pretty soon all the whole world is going to be looking for recreation. At least some of us, But that's always been the way. There's never been a time when there wasn't very wealthy people on the planet and very, very poor people on the planet. That's the nature of our existence, and that's not going to change. But what can change is our game, our what we want in life. See, that's what I like about the South American Mita, where you get together and you help everybody. And oh, by the way, what they were helping, they had instead of tearing down this house in South America, they move them because they're small they're like little boats almost, little, maybe a 2-bedroom with the kitchen, kind of little bungalow. And so they put them on skids. And then with the oxen and the people and everything else, they pull these houses to where they want to the new location, And this one was by the water. They're going to pull it. They got a place for the water, and so they don't tear anything down and rebuild it. What they do, they move it, and that's where they need all the people to help move their houses around. I see the future. This is what I see with the future. Is we use the artificial intelligence, the computers, to show us how to grow food, for instance, to feed the planet. Because that was the other thing they did when they're moving the house. Their staple of food was potatoes. And so what they did, they had a feast. And what they did, they dug a big hole, and then they put the potatoes in the hole, and then they get the burning material on top of it. And so they baked the potatoes in this big hole, and then they put, I guess, seaweed, kelp, stuff like that, burns, and they roast the potatoes in the big hole, and then after they pull they dig up the potatoes again, and they're all cooked, and then they put the spice and the salsa, everything else. It looks so good because I grew up with potatoes. I see us combating climate change to the point where we do eliminate the need for fossil fuel. See, there's reason why the oil was stuck so far underground. We weren't supposed to be using oil to burn, That's why it was stuck where it was. See, the way God designed the universe, the sun, it gives you all the energy you need. You got to learn how to use it. But it's there, and it's cheap. You don't have to dig anything. All you have to do is just be in an area where the sun shines. And the water, we've learned how to deal with water, excessive water. And we've learned how to get our energy now out of the wind. The wind, the waves, the tide, all that has power. And then now with the electric cars and vehicles, pretty soon there won't be humans in wars anymore. They'll be fought with drones, like they're doing now. Like the Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is a modern war. What they did, they get all the innocent people they can out of the area, put them in areas where they're safe, destroy whatever buildings and everything else they can, because you need to destroy them in order to rebuild them. And when you rebuild them, now you rebuild them into modern technology where the power lines are underneath. They're not going to start forest fires or anything else. And so we're coming into this area of our life where we have to learn how to not just get along and how to help each other, but everything has to be a mita. And what you really want to do with your population is to educate them. See, that's what you want to do.
Education is so important, you're right. And we need to up the education. I mean, it's so important.
Yes. And if you notice in China, the communists, it won't last. The communist rule won't last. It eventually will die with like everything else that dies, when it's no longer useful, you see. because back in the day, the Chinese were still, the Chinese are way ahead of us, always have been. The Chinese, my people, they discovered acupuncture way back in the day. The marijuana, cannabis was always used to cure cancer back in the day, back thousands of years ago. Cannabis was never illegal. It was always a medicine. It wasn't until America, the Puritans, come up with this way of enslaving the indigenous people, that they came up with laws against whatever medicine they were using. All of a sudden, it's against the law, to do that. It's against the law to be Mexican. It's against the law to be black. It's all that crap, That's we're getting out of that. We're getting out of that, and we're getting more into what I see is we're here for a couple of reasons. One is to repopulate the planet. That's why we're there. Now, we can't overpopulate. And that explains the gay, the homosexual. Because you can have love and everything else, but they're not going to repopulate the planet. And so you need those tribes to keep the population down. But the heterosexual ones, that's their job. Keep getting the healthy humans to go on with it. There's no need to fight or to kill or to hurt anybody, and other than moral issues, where we have to learn right from wrong and everything else. There's a lot of things going on, especially with AI, artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, it's given us a computer. It's given us the phone, the iPhone. I mean, in my lifetime, can you imagine in my lifetime, I saw the advent of the telephone, of the electric car now. I tried to build an electric car. I tried to build an electric bike years ago. And I never had the battery or the expertise, but I had the foresight. I saw it coming. And this is what I see now. I see recreation as our form of income, our form of spreading the moral code. See, the human life, there are rules that if you follow the rules, you will lead a long, happy, productive life. No, the reason, we also got to remember, some of us know that eternity is real. We are eternal beings, our spirits. We are eternal beings. We're that energy that has always been in this physical universe and the spiritual universe. There's two, because you can't have one without the other. And so you need up. In order to have down, you have to have up.
Exactly.
Now, if there's nothing in the spiritual world, there has to be a world where there's everything. And that's what we are. In the physical world, there's everything. In the spiritual world, I realized the opposite of everything is nothing. So the spiritual world is so microscopic, is that it can have universes in there, countless universes in area that has nothing to make it expand, for instance. But our souls are eternal. Now, we don't know everything. We're not supposed to know everything because we're evolving. That's the whole thing about evolving. Like, if you look at early man, they had no idea that the earth went around. They thought earth was flat, and if you sailed too far, you'd fall off the edge. you know. And when you think about it, there's still people on Earth that think that way.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. Now I got to ask you though. You've given so much insight today and so much wisdom, and I love that. But I got to ask you, can you do me a favor? Can you tell me a great Hollywood story that you encounter? Because I always love when people have a great, great story. Something that happened to you that just sticks with you.
A Hollywood story.
Or something in your career that just was one of those, oh my God, I've made it, or just something that was just something you never thought would ever happen to you.
I guess my oh my God moment was I was playing in the Vancouvers. That was our band. By the way, our band, you talk about comedians. How did you get, people say, how did you get into comedy? Well, I hung out with black guys that made you laugh so much. Because what I found out about the black race was that this is how they made it through. Some got lynched. A lot of them got tortured, beat, and everything else. But the bulk of them made it through with humor. It was their humor. That's why the black comedians are top of the world, because it was the black. When I got involved when I found out how the simple blues hit me, it was like, oh, now that's what I want to play. That's the music I want to do. And so I never wanted to become a guitar player, but I could play guitar. In fact, anything I do in my life, I never wanted to really be it. I just became it. I could do it, and I enjoy it. But what I had an encounter with Jimi Hendrix, the great Jimi Hendrix. Now, I've been doing some research on Jimi, and I found out that we have a lot in common. He was a guitar player. He was trying to learn how to play guitar, and he found Guitar Shorty, another blues guitar player. Well, I met Guitar Shorty around the same time as Jimi. In fact, but I was older than Guitar Shorty, but I guess we're about the same age. He passed away anyway. But Guitar Shorty, he was a black guy that could play guitar. Really good. Played the blues, the hell out of the blues, but it wasn't good enough to play. Guitar Shorty had an act where he had a long guitar cord attached to his amp, and he would run and dive off the stage with his guitar, and then do a body roll when he hit the ground, and jump up and keep playing and do the splits. But literally, I've seen him jump off like a 6-foot stage, that was 6 foot high, and land on the ground and do a roll. And, I got to know Shorty, and then I asked, no one has ever seen. There's no tape of him. There's nothing. There's no proof that he did that. And then he quit doing it. As he got older, what the fuck am I doing? But my story I'll never forget was we're in England. We're backing up Chris Clark. There's a very gorgeous girl. He was trying to make her a star, and our band was there. And as a reward, we had a gig in a little club called the Speakeasy. And we're playing there, and there's no one there. No one came. No one knew who we were. And then all of a sudden, the door opens. Jimi Hendrix walks in looked like a peacock, with his flamboyant shirts and his hair and everything. He walks up to the stage, and he calls me by name. And he goes, "Hey, Tommy. Hey, mind if I sit in?" And my urge my comedic urge was maybe the last set, Jimmy, but because we're working on some tunes, man. No, so right away I said, yeah, and I took out my guitar, and he goes, no, I want to play bass.
Wow.
Because I'll play bass. And so the poor bass player, the bass player had to give his bass up to Jimmy. Jimmy sat there and played the hell out of the bass. I played guitar. Eddie Patterson, our other guitar player, our lead guitar player, we were in heaven. We're up there, we're playing, and we played so long, the owners of the club pulled the plug and said, okay, you guys out of here, And then we went back to the hotel to party with Jimmy. Well, Jimmy never came out of the bathroom. He stayed in the bathroom the whole time. And of course, he shot up and everything else. And then when he left, we didn't even see him leave. But he was so popular that girls were climbing up the elevator shaft to get to our rooms to get a piece of Jimmy. That's how popular he was. And so we're riding in the limousine, one of the Beatles limousines that they had used during one of the shoots, with the Yellow Submarine or something. And now we just played with Hendrix. We're riding in the Beatles limousine, and we're looking at each other saying, this is crazy. And then someone said, Hendrix, eh? And then for some reason, I said, blurted out, I don't talk usually. I blurted out, I says, I'm going to be bigger than Hendrix someday. And the band stopped, looked at me. Almost, I felt the car even stop. And everybody just looked at me like they knew that, that I could play guitar, but not like Hendrix. And then the drummer says, as a guitar player? And I said, no. And that was it. I said, no, not as a guitar player. But something told me at that moment that I was going to be bigger than Hendrix. And to this day, and I asked the guitar player, Eddie, I talked to him on the phone a while back. He went back to Toronto. The band broke up after, we got to Motown. And I was trying to get a green card, and the band broke up. I tried to get the other band members a green card, but they didn't want to pursue it. They wanted to go back to Canada. I was the only one that wanted to keep doing the Hollywood thing. And but to me, that was an admission, a couple of admissions that I had made that I didn't mean to. I never thought of it. It came out, and that's why I know that I'm possessed by a really, really good spirit, and as my reward, this is my reward. I get to talk about it, and I think that's just talking about it now. I think that is my job, because Hendrix never talked. He wouldn't have too many interviews. He was very shy. He didn't want to sing, and he didn't really knew that he could sing. Everybody could sing, but Hendrix was not a singer. He was he just wanted to be the guitar player, but not only sing, but he could write. And then he was ordained, and that's why I think that's why he left us early. That happens to those guys. Because like John Lennon, for instance, wow, what a talent. The only Beatle I haven't hooked up with is Paul. And
well,
Paul is really, well, Paul and I, we got a bucket list going. He knows that my bucket list is to get high with him. And he told me, he's looking forward to that. Said, let's make it happen, mate.
That's awesome, Tommy. Yeah, I want to thank you so much for talking to me. You are such a good storyteller, and I still think, as I said when I was listening to You're Like My Eye this week, and that whole album, it just took me back to when I was a little kid, and we had hit on it earlier that at that age, we just want to laugh. And so I want to thank you for many years of laughter, and thank you so much. Now your website, you have a website, right?
Yeah, we got a couple of...
Okay, so everyone Google Tommy Chong, Google Cheech and Chong. Go just check out all their work, and check out Tommy's work. Go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find over 900 episodes. Email me at cooper@coopertalk.net. Twitter, I'm at CooperTalk. Instagram, at CooperTalk1. Remember, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guest. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you guys next time.